Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Baxy's Musical Podcast. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to it, like it, share with everyone you know. And if you can leave a big fat review, that would be awesome too. And make sure you check out Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for regular updates on what's coming up next on future episodes. Today's episode is brought to you by Metro Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Chicopee. Visit Metro's state-of-the-art dealership right near BJ's and Big Y on Memorial Drive in Chicopee, or visit metrojeep.com and drive home in your brand new Chrysler Dodge Jeep and Ram today.
It's Baxy's Musical Podcast.
Resistance is useless.
In 1957, Jim Stewart and his sister Estelle Axton formed Satellite Records in a garage in Memphis, Tennessee. Originally, this was a record label that released country, pop, and rockabilly singles. But within 4 years, Satellite Records would rebrand itself and focus primarily on Memphis soul and R&B. The name of this new company was called Stax Records, and within a short period of time, Stax would become one of the most important and respected record labels in America. Stax was producing hits for Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, Isaac Hayes, Wilson Pickett, Albert King, Booker T and the MGs, the Staple Singers, and dozens of others. Part of the success of this record label was not only the fact that the house band was Booker T and the MGs, but throughout most of their productive years, Stax employed a stable of incredible songwriters who were responsible for some of the most fantastic singles ever recorded. Songwriters like Eddie Floyd, William Bell, Mac Rice, Carla and Rufus Thomas, and many others. And while you may not recognize those names, there's a very good chance that you may remember their music. Over the years, Stax would go through many changes, changing hands multiple times, facing bankruptcy and ceasing operations, in spite of several attempts to revive itself. Last year, Kraft Recordings, a reissuing subsidiary of Concord Records, which revived the Stax label yet again, released an amazing 7-CD box set entitled Written in Their Soul, the Stax Songwriter Demos. This is a gorgeous box set that not only brings the music of Stax Records back into the spotlight, it focuses on the demo recordings of the original songwriters, performing with all the passion and emotion that the songwriters intended these songs to be. The result is amazing. And this is why the Written in Their Soul box set was just awarded a pair of Grammys, including Best Historical Album. The box set was compiled and produced by my very good friend, Cheryl Pawelski from Omnivore Recordings. This is Cheryl's fourth Grammy, having won previously on some amazing projects that included Hank Williams Sr., Wilco, and Fred Rogers. However, during all of that success, this was a project that took Cheryl more than 17 years to complete. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear exactly why. Cheryl Pawelski and I have known each other for nearly 40 years. She is an extraordinary woman with perhaps the deepest passion for music of anybody that I have ever known. And as a fellow college classmate, I can tell you that I am hardly the only Marquette University graduate that shares an enormous sense of pride in Cheryl's amazing accomplishments. And we're going to talk about that and the box set and the Grammys and about some of the latest releases that are coming out of Omnivore Recordings. It is always a pleasure to welcome back my very good friend, the incredible Cheryl Pawelski from Omnivore Recordings on Baxy's Musical Podcast. I'm so glad to have you back. I really am. I know the last time we talked, I threatened to contact you every time you won a Grammy.
It was the first thing that came to mind when they called our name. I thought, oh, crap, I got to talk to Mike Baxendale again.
I hope that wasn't the first thing on your mind, but, you know, I'm glad you kept it.
I thought, oh, great, I can't wait. No, I was ready for you this time.
Good, good. You've now won 4 of these things, 10 or 12 more, and you and Taylor Swift are neck and neck. So you're
She's hard to catch.
I don't know.
She runs faster than I do.
You're going at a hell of a clip, Cheryl. You really are. Tell me about that night. I mean, you're up against some pretty good competition to get nominated and then to win again. I mean, what does it feel like to go through? Because I mean, you're pouring your heart and soul into this project, and you win and get the recognition that this particular box set really deserved. What does that feel like?
Yeah. Well, each one is really different, because they all have sort of different histories and stories and trajectories as to how they came to be.
Mm,
And but there were a couple of projects I started when I worked at Concord, and this is one of them. And they took me both 17 years to complete. So yeah, so
yeah.
this was a sweet one. Also, the Art Pepper box set that we just put out last year, this one right here.
Hmm.
That was I started those two when I was at Concord, and I was only at Concord for a year and change. So both of those date back 17 years, and this one was especially special, if I can say that, because Miss Deanie Parker, who was an original employee of Stax, songwriter at Stax, artist at Stax, and then longtime publicist at Stax,
Mm,
CEO of the Soulsville Foundation, which is the foundation that oversees the charter school and the Stax Museum in Memphis. I mean, her whole life has been Stax. And during the pandemic, after I had finished going through all of the audio, and I know we'll get to all of that, but I called her and I said, Deanie, I finished this project. And she's like, you got to be kidding me, because I'd been after her for years about this stuff. And early on, she had given me the demos that she had, which was great. But I don't think anybody expected that this would ever get done. So it was extra sweet because Deanie agreed to be my co-producer. She agreed to co-write the liner notes with Robert Gordon, who produced the documentary on Stax and also has written a book on Stax. And to see her front and center, giving two acceptance speeches, that was awesome.
yeah.
I'm resistant to call it like, one of those sort of career defining things, although I suppose it is. I hate that because I'm like, oh, but there's so much left to be done, you know. But this one was one for the ages, so it was extra special for a lot of reasons.
I've been listening to it for the last couple of weeks, and
Hmm.
it's absolutely amazing. What this box set really represents. And I think the thing that I appreciated the most is knowing you as I do, and for as long as I have, I hear Cheryl Pawelski all over it. And by that I mean I know of very few people who are touched by music in quite the way you are. And I'm visualizing you sitting in front of all this audio and just being, just so powerfully moved by what is being presented to you. And
Hmm.
because I mean, even as a listener, without the same connection that you have, I found some of these songs at times to be really very emotional because
Yeah,
you're really hearing what the songwriter wanted to represent in these songs. And I
right.
think that's just a fascinating aspect of the entire project. Tell me about that and what this was meaning to you as you're sifting through all of this amazing music.
Well, it's sifting is the right word, because the demos were, after they were recorded, they were likely on tape or acetates originally, right? And they got filed with the publisher. The publisher copyrights the songs, and they look after the composition, whereas the record companies look after the sound recording. And a song can be recorded a zillion different times, but it's still the same song, right?
Sure.
So the publisher, that's their job. Like, their job is to go out and get, it used to be like sort of Tin Pan Alley, right? Like, get cuts, right? You'd have these guys shopping songs. And the demo, which is what these Stax recordings are, they're the songwriter demos. They're the essence of the song. And but I had to surface them out of all of this material, because the original tapes or acetates or whatever they were taken by the publisher in the late 80s, and with all of their other publishing demos. So there was all this stuff mixed in with all of the, and they just randomly archived them to DATs, which is digital audio tapes. They're these little things. Um, those DATs started going bad sometime in the 90s, probably late 90s. Then they laid all the DATs onto drives. But they never sorted anything. It was just sort of like, ah, yeah, we've got that stuff in our archives. And so they gave me a range of drives to go through, and that's what took me so long. I had, because it's not like they were all well indexed and, oh, this is this artist or songwriter singing this song, and you can just skip ahead. They were just big globs of audio. And so I had to pull out the things that I thought were Stax demos.
Hmm.
So there was thousands of hours of audio. And so I do it on planes and, in my spare time. And, because since I started this project, I went from working at Concord, then to Rhino, then to starting my own company and doing all of this other stuff. But, the first song I heard when I just sort of nudged in there, the first Stax demo that I heard was, it wasn't Wilson Pickett singing 6345789. It was Steve Cropper and Eddie Floyd. And it was raw. It was just raw. And I'm like, woo, I want to hear more of this. And so as I was going, anytime I despaired and thought, ugh, I don't need to hear any more Broadway show tunes for shows that never happened, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that was in there. But every now and then I would just find a gem, and there are so many gems.
There's tons of them,
Yeah.
and as I'm going deeper into each track, I'm going, my God, this had to be just the longest process in the world to go through all. Well, I mean, there's seven
But so
CDs.
compelling,
Well, it's very compelling. I mean, you're talking about nearly 150 demos,
Yeah.
and many of which have never been heard in that form before. And like I said, I mean, you're talking about songwriters like Eddie Floyd and Homer
Yeah.
Banks and Mac Rice, and I mean, you could
Yeah.
go on, and to hear them sing these songs with the emotion,
Yeah.
the same emotion that they wrote the songs in, and try to
Yeah.
interpret them in their own way without producers or your other artists. I mean, it's so interesting to listen to, like you say, the very essence of each track. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Well, and the other thing, like some of them are just, at home on a boombox kind of, or, Betty Crutcher, her tape recorder is in the Stax Museum now, and it's a little reel to reel, has a little mic, but some of them were fully fleshed out recordings because when Stax was at the height of its power, the publishing company and the studio and record company, they were all in the same building. And what Miss Parker was saying is, oh yeah, if somebody was just, there was a session happening down here, but over in B, there might be like somebody laying down a demo, and they would come out and say, hey, sing backup, or Steve Cropper is just hanging out on the couch, and you pull him in to do kind of a head arrangement on something, and that's what you're hearing here. So you're hearing the essence of the song, and sometimes you're just hearing these great musicians playing off the top of their head, just so somebody can lay down their song and pitch it to anybody from the Staple Singers to William Bell to Otis Redding,
Yeah.
whoever.
To give people a brief understanding of what Stax is all about. I mean,
We're just blah, blah.
no. I mean, it's you can say, well, that sounds a little bit like Motown or other record companies. There's some similarities, of course, but Stax is a company. It started in a garage in Memphis, and within a couple of years, it rebrands itself as Stax from Satellite Records. But then it goes through this period where
Yeah.
it's hit after hit after hit, and then over the course of time, they start to have their own issues with, other agreements that they made that may have worked out, may not
Right.
have worked out. The idea that there was this much music and still in shape enough to record is pretty interesting. Tell me a little bit about the importance of Stax though over the course of time, from what was it, 57 to 1980. That's really where their biggest,
Yeah.
block is.
Yeah. Well, I kind of always refer to it as the audio history of civil rights in
Mm,
America. And Miss Parker marched with Dr. King. They were very involved with civil rights, and really important. Beside, I mean, Motown had its slickness and its factoriness, and everybody loves those songs. But for me, Stax was always just sort of the heart and soul of that era and the civil rights movement. The representation, the Watt Stax film, to see places huge as that stadium in Los Angeles just filled with people, and, Rufus Thomas up there doing the chicken, the funky chicken. It's just it's amazing. I mean, I know that we lived through that era, but we were so young. But it was I think it was imprinted on everybody that went through that time, and I think that these songs, they reflect that in a way,
Yeah.
when I hear these songs, especially staple singers,
Yeah.
when you hear those songs, it's not like I remember them all that well from being a kid, but they've been sort of ever present in my life. So I think, just in US history, there's this inflection point, and Stax was really at the heart of it. So it's really culturally important.
I was watching the Kraft Records YouTube channel, and it had
Uh-huh.
this. I know because when I research, I want to get as deep in the weeds as I possibly could. And
Sure.
there was this great series of videos where they had Eddie Floyd, Henderson Thigpen, Deanie Parker, and Bobby
Oh,
Manuel
yeah.
sitting together talking about Stax and
Yeah.
about the atmosphere of the place, and you just get the sense that they are all so grateful to have been a part of it, and that it really is like an extension of who they are, to have been not just as writers, but to have been a part of all this music. And I mean, you just get the sense that this is all overwhelming to them, to finally have their interpretations out there, and being
Oh,
appreciated as
yeah.
they are. It must mean so much to them.
Well, we did the record release party last summer in Memphis, and we at the Stax Museum we had Mr. William Bell, Mr. Eddie Floyd, Mr. Henderson Thigpen, Mr. Bobby Manuel, Robert moderated, and Miss Parker was there as well, and then me. I'm like the big, the big toe sticking out of, the sock. It's like, what am I doing up here, But at least Robert's from Memphis, but it was so powerful, Mr. Thigpen's daughter came up to me to thank me afterwards and just said, you've just done a wonderful thing for my dad. And I'm like, I'm just
Yeah.
like,
Well, the thing about it is, songwriters, they're kind of the forgotten heroes in a lot of ways,
yeah,
especially when it comes to these kinds of writing situations, like in the 50s and 60s, where you had songwriters and you had artists and you had producers and then everybody else, and
right.
everything was separate, and very rarely was a songwriter allowed to record their own music. And to have these people finally get their due, and they're the ones pouring their hearts out on their sleeves in some of these songs.
Sure.
I have to believe that someone like Mr. Thigpen just feels just so validated by all of
Yeah.
this attention, and then to have it be a Grammy award winning box set. It's like, oh shit,
Well, I sure hope
unbelievable.
he's having fun with it, But, yeah, it was remarkably touching, and actually, during that presentation, Robert, we played a couple songs here and there, and the writers commented on them, and, this was a career moment for me. The audience, so he starts playing Mac Rice's very primitive demo of "Respect Yourself," right? It's that chunka, 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 and on
Yep.
that out of tune guitar. And, so we're listening along, and we come to the chorus, and the audience extemporaneously, unprompted, sings the background vocals. The na 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 na, and I just, again, I'm just a big crying mess. It was ridiculous. It was so so surprising and so wonderful. I mean, this project has been filled with those sorts of moments, and culminating in these 2 Grammy wins, and it's hard for me to get perspective on it, but I can say that, it's the heart that I intended it to have, it has, and it's big and vast and overflowing, and to have that reflected back to me, I think that's the puzzling part. I'm like, I felt that when I was working on it. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
this is the stuff.
This, and
Like,
that's why I say I could feel Cheryl Pawelski all over it, because because I know the kind of music listener you are. I mean, you and I are similar in some ways, but I mean, I think your passion goes way beyond what mine is, and then to have access to this stuff is really very very special. What would you say was like the biggest surprise moment in going through this entire project?
Oh boy. It was, so it was a little bit like a Rubik's cube. This one and last year, and I know they're back to back Grammys, but the Yankee Hotel Foxtrot thing, right?
Yeah,
Both of them, I was trying to figure out how to make them organized for a listener and functional for a listener and digestible for a listener, and there was just this enormous amount of material for both of them, and so both of them were these puzzles. And the biggest, most surprising moment on the Stax one was realizing, once I was able to identify the songs and the people who were performing them and the songwriters, because I didn't have this information, right? It was all, I had to research it, excavate it backwards,
right.
right? I realized how much material had never been cut,
Mm,
right? It had never been recorded and released. And that's when I had those three discs. The last three discs of the set are all songs that, to the best of any of our knowledge, never got recorded, much less released by anybody. So there was this just enormous amount of material that was just left. It wasn't even on the cutting room floor. It never even made it to the
yeah.
floor. And
And
the
the
quality
and
of the
they're
song,
yeah, they're all great songs. I
they're
felt that as I was
great.
going through those last 2 CDs too. It's like, wow, these I mean, how amazing that these songs are existing in the world and no one's ever heard them. Amazing to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and some of the performances, there are a couple of tracks where we had 2 demos. There's that song "Too Much Sugar for a Dime," and there's a Homer Banks version, and then there's a Betty Crutcher version. And the Betty Crutcher version, has background vocals and everything. It sounds slightly unfinished, so I think it may technically be an outtake from her one solo record.
Mm,
But both of them, the song is so awesome. I'm like, that should have been a hit,
yeah.
and why wasn't that on Betty's record? Why wasn't that on anybody's record? You know?
The one thing
So,
we haven't talked about this is Booker T and the MGs and the
yeah,
importance that they had in Stax. And you keep as you go through the stories over and over again, you keep hearing Steve Cropper's name over and over and over again
yep,
about how really essential he was to not only this
yeah,
record company but just in music in general. That
yeah.
Cropper's influence is really just like undeniably deep.
Yeah, all the guys in that band, I mean, they were, for all intents and purposes, at certain points, the house band,
Yeah,
so if they were there, I know Miss Parker wrote a lot with Mr. Cropper, and, they turned out a couple hits, and I think that, talking about the writers, they were the ones cashing the checks though, right?
sure.
'Cause, they get their songwriter royalties whether they're out, beating themselves up on the road or not, and I think that's sort of the eventual reason I think Deanie took a job, at and kept writing, but, took a job at Stax. She said, "Man, I don't wanna be out on the road. That's no life for me."
Yeah.
But, she kept writing. So, it's the writers were a special case, but I have to say with most of them, I don't understand why there was never Homer Banks records. The guy sang great,
Yeah, he had a great voice. Yeah.
amazing, but, he just didn't become the artist. He was a hell of a songwriter though,
Yeah.
you know? Amazing.
I don't want to focus purely on the box set as great as it is because there's some other really interesting stuff coming up through Omnivore, which I think is really cool
Oh,
too. Um,
okay.
so I mean, I wanted to pivot back to to your own company here because the longer I do this podcast and the more I talk to people who have released stuff through Omnivore, and you're
Mm,
talking everybody through Scott McCoy and Roger Manning, Thomas Walsh, and we've talked about most of those guys before. They all, whenever I mention your name and the fact that we've known each other for almost 40 years or whatever it's been, you know
that's
I
creepy.
know it is creepy, but they all share the same sense of respect for you and for this company. And I don't know if they ever get the chance to share their appreciation with you. But even when Omnivore releases something new, it's usually because Omnivore, and particularly you and your staff, really truly believe in it. Which
Mhm.
is you don't always get that with a record company where they're releasing stuff that they truly are behind and support. That
Right.
is kind of an unusual thing about the music business in general.
The music business is, for all intents and purposes, no longer,
Yeah,
you know? And it's unfortunate, but it's not easy these days being a record company. So we try not to put out new records, and the reason is I really don't want to mess up anybody's chance. But the problem is there's so few labels out there that they're all overwhelmed. Same with management companies and booking agents and all of that sort of stuff. The infrastructure of our business is pretty much gone. And so it's hard. It's so hard to say no all the time, but I'm like, believe me, it's for your own good, you know. So I try not to do that stuff. There are audiences that we speak to, where I know we have a better shot. We really are a catalog historical company, and we're that intentionally,
yeah,
I know where to find the audience for new writers of the Purple Sage. I don't know where to find a new audience for a new artist, or sometimes even an audience for an older artist, because
yeah.
we just don't we're not the bank that the majors are, where they
Sure.
can just throw money at stuff.
But when you talk about, the historical part of it, one of the things
Mhm.
that leapt out at me is the record for Terry Adams from NRBQ.
Yeah,
NRBQ's got a huge following in here in
yeah,
New England, and
yeah,
always has, and always been very supportive of when, Terry decides to get the band back together, in whatever form that may
yeah,
be. This
yeah.
record, Terrible, I was listening to it the other
Terrible.
day. It's funny that it's called Terrible because it's actually really very good. It's a very
It's
eclectic.
awesome.
It really is. It's a very
Yeah.
eclectic sounding record.
Well, Terry's funny because, yeah, I love him and I love the band. I love the old band. I love the new band. I love everything in RBQ, right? So he always has an open door here. And he had done that record. There was a gentleman who worked at Nonesuch for a long time that I worked with, named Artie Moorhead. And he's no longer there. But back before he was working at Nonesuch, I think he was called New World Records,
Mhm.
and that's who Terry originally made this for. And it's so funny because I didn't know Artie, I why would I have gone and to look up Terry's solo work with New World Records? I had the record, I had Terrible, but I didn't know it was at Artie, my later day friends insistence or invitation that Terry made this record. And I'm so glad he did. And the people that he chose to be on there, part of the Sunrod gang and all that stuff.
Mhm.
It's really a wonderful record. And so, when Terry's like, I would like to put out Terrible, I'm like, fantastic. I really, I hope people who aren't hip to NRBQ and Terry Adams really just buy all their records.
But you really get a sense of his musicianship, and
Oh my
and on
God.
this record. I mean, he's just a phenomenal musician.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all the guys in the band, past and present,
yeah,
they are phenomenal. They are brilliant. And that's why, this is just another piece in the ongoing story of that brilliance.
yeah.
So, if you like music at all and have a pulse, you should buy all of those records, all of them.
One of the other things I was listening to, and I can't say that I have an overwhelmingly large exposure to gospel, but you guys
Mm,
released the Mighty Clouds of Joy,
yeah.
Kicking, and when I'm listening to it, I was like really enjoying it. Yeah, and I know this band, the Mighty Clouds of Joy, are very significant and have a history. Tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about them, because I know it's not just another gospel record. It really is something pretty
Right.
special.
Well, they were starting to cross over, right? They had been, much maligned as, sort of a gospel group. What were they calling them? Like the gospel Elvises, because, they wore, sort of disco gear by the 70s, right?
Right.
And they were having crossover pop hits. And I love I love when two forms of music cross over. I think you get really special things. Two very pure sources of music. I That's why I love bands like Fairport Convention all the way through the Waterboys. Right, you're taking traditional music and mixing it up with the rock and the roll. Right, and in some ways, the gospel crossover material is just amazing. And I mean, you can talk about Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace. You can talk
Hmm.
about, all kinds of things, all the way through Mighty Clouds of Joy, Blind Boys of Alabama, all of this stuff, right? So as soon as these things start mixing it up a little bit, I think you get really special records. And I've been on a little bit of a disco soul R&B bender.
Hmm.
So when I saw that this record was possible for us to reissue, I thought that is cool. There's some really good stuff on there. So, it's we meander through the genres and find interesting things to do.
You and I have talked a lot in the past about our shared appreciation for Big Star, and you guys have released the third Sister Lovers record, and
Yeah.
Chilton and Chris Bell. But you've also
Mhm.
just released Van Duren and the Good Question, and this is a guy
Oh, yeah.
with a lot of connection with Big Star, and at one point nearly joined them.
Mhm.
I think during that third record. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, I don't know enough about him, but as I'm listening to it, it was really really good. It was a really good record.
Yeah, no, he's exceptional. He still plays in Memphis. He was good friends with all those guys. And I just sort of like all things Memphis, just sort of met him very organically throughout this entire process. And he's just a stellar human and just a wonderful guy. And still making great records. And when he was able to get his first two solo records back, he called. And I'm so glad we were able to do those, and the soundtrack to the documentary.
Yeah.
There were you should if you can I think it's streaming now, actually. The documentary, we did the soundtrack for it. There were two gentlemen from Australia that fell in love with Van's first solo record. And just went bananas and made a documentary about him.
Wow.
So definitely check that out. But yeah, Van called me middle of last year and said, "So I've got this live thing." And I think it was 1992. I was like, man, that's 92. And then he sent it to me and I was like, okay. Yes, it's so good. He's just so good. And his songs are just absolutely wonderful. So but yeah, Waiting, the Van Duren story. Like I said, we have the soundtrack, we have both of his original solo records, fleshed out with bonus tracks, and then this is the latest thing we've got by him.
It's funny that you mentioned this newfound appreciation for disco. I saw that Omnivore is about to release something from the Silver Convention.
You are correct,
That
sir.
is that is it's so funny. I mean, because I got a stack of K-Tel records in my basement that I don't know if I should
Oh,
be
yeah.
proud to show or bring
Yes,
upstairs or what. But
absolutely.
yeah, but you know what? Fly Robin Fly is a great song. I don't care what anybody says.
It is, and, I know it for a multitude of cultural reasons. Probably little kids like you and me were supposed to not like disco. But I have to say, like, I've been truly poking around in it now for a bit, and there's something compelling about it. And maybe it's because the repetition, I know, it's made for dancing, but it also kind of plays to, like, sort of my crowdy side, because the repetition, and I mean, I know they're not the same, but they're not dissimilar in the repetitiveness in which things are grounded. So, is it Can? Is it Silver Convention, right? I mean, what else do we have coming up here? Is it Ohio Players, or is it, oh,
Okay.
Actually, by the time this comes out, we will have announced this. The first Ohio Players is called Observations in Time.
Uh-huh.
It's pre-disco. It came out on Capitol in like '69, but we have all this bonus stuff on it that predates even that Capitol record. So this is pre-disco Ohio Players. It's really
Wow.
it's pretty fun.
So, I mean, what else is coming up? I know there's a number of projects still yet to come.
Mhm.
What's on the calendar right now?
Well, we've got, like I said, I'm having a moment here. So we've got a Lenny Williams title, a Stylistics title, a Doris Troy title called Another Look. And it seems like when she did these two singles on Midland International, and on one of them I saw on the 45, it said from the forthcoming record, Another Look. And there's no record called Another Look. It
Hmm.
was not forthcoming. Um, so I had these couple of tracks that were on singles and 12 inches from the mid 70s. And then my friend David Nathan, who people might know as the British ambassador of soul, he actually was friends with Doris and produced some sides with her in like that late 70s, early 80s period. And I thought, there's the record, there's Another Look. So we built it with the things that came out on Midland International and then the material that David put together. So one last Doris Troy record. Then Silver Convention Ohio Players. We've got some record store day stuff coming up. I'm not sure when we're going to announce that. I think end of this week, so I can probably tell you, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Why not?
Um, a Little Richard record called Right Now from 1973 that he did right at the end of his time with Warner Reprise. He did it in one night, we think, in Los Angeles, and it was in the cutout bins for years. It was just, I think it was done for a record called a label called United, and it was like budget fodder. But I picked it up and listened to it, and I was like, this is pretty good. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So we're gonna issue that's never been reissued. So that'll be on vinyl for Record Store Day, and then we'll put it on CD digital after. We have elongated the Dr. John Atco Atlantic Singles compilation from a couple years back. So that's gonna be a double album for Record Store Day. And I've been in conversations with the Dr. John estate about a bunch of stuff. So
Oh, very
that's
cool.
this. Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
this is the first of many things. And then 10,000 Maniacs. We put out that record playing favorites, and it now arrives on vinyl with some bonus stuff
That's awesome.
on the fourth side. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that'll be good.
It's funny. I've done a number of interviews with some people that a lot of their music, for whatever reason, either went unreleased or unreissued, and
Mhm.
their music fell into total obscurity. So it's always really great for me to hear that someone is either getting the rights to their music back and finally has the opportunity to release it. And
Right.
you can't help but think how much music has been lost over the years for, reasons that are completely out of anyone's control. There are
Yeah.
certain gatekeepers that allow music to be released and certain gatekeepers that, for whatever reason suppress all this great music. And it's not just because it's bad. It just, it's like one
Right.
person saying, I'm not willing to write the check for this. And
Sure.
there's something really interesting when you hear an artist that music finally gets released and you go, holy crap, how have I been denied this?
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated when that happens, and it's always great to hear that you're doing that with certain artists, records that for whatever reason fell into hiding, and to finally
Right.
get that exposure is really awesome.
Well, the hard thing for super nerds like us, like super music aficionados, let's call us ourselves that, is, it is the grand chasm between what record companies really are,
Hmm.
which are businesses. They're not in this for philanthropy or cultural, historic heritage, anything, blah, blah, blah. They are there to make a buck.
Sure.
And unfortunately, we've got a couple generations of humans now that don't realize that they are renting all of this stuff, and it can be pulled at any moment for the benefit of some shareholders somewhere.
Yeah.
So I talk to an awful lot of students of various ages, and when I say that to them, you can just see the light go on above their heads. It's like, you mean I might not be able to listen to, X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to, maybe, I mean, think about it, you know?
Look at like Neil Young pulling his music from Spotify.
Yeah, sure.
There's like 37 records that are now gone that you
Right,
really need to get the physical media to really enjoy,
right,
what that guy put out. And he is not the only person out there that's either done that on their own by their own choice, or
right.
a record company has a problem, or it becomes a legal
Yeah,
issue. It happens all the
yeah,
time. You're absolutely right, Ted. There's a difference between the rental and owning stuff. And
correct.
if you and I only had the endless budget to own everything.
I get a lot of free records.
Yeah, well,
Here's
I
here
did too. So it's
yeah. Here's the other thing, and just like a bigger perspective. I think probably the best music ever made was made on somebody's back porch, and it dissipated into thin air,
yeah,
right? So it's very ephemeral, and the fact that we actually catch some of it, we catch some of these moments enough that we can share them, and I can replicate them 1,000 times, and you can buy them or rent them. You know, that's a form of human expression, and it is so ephemeral. It just disappears, and there's records that will never come back into print. There's a whole lot of them that shouldn't, right?
right.
Because they probably were not great.
Yeah.
But there are things, and I kind of see, my job has grown into being that of more of a storyteller, a storyteller for music, right? Like I try to throw this stuff into the future that I dig, because the time that we're living in right now is we're straddling this digital era and this physical era. And so things are going to be lost. And that's just reality. And so, for me, I'm like, okay, I'm in a very probably enviable position where I can take things and I can replicate them. It's sort of like preservation through proliferation, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I feel like if I make 1,000 of something, it's 1,000 times more likely to get to the little you or me
Right.
200 years from, right?
Yeah. As the years go by and you've got all these old tapes. I mean, Written in Their Soul is a perfectly good example. You were very lucky to have this stuff all on hard drives. If you had been searching
Mm.
for the original tapes, who knows what kind of physical shape they might have been in, if they were in any shape at all. I
I
mean,
would have we had some, but
yeah,
here's the thing, I would have been really happy to have the originals. The flaws were twice baked in digitally by the time I got this stuff,
yeah,
So, I mean, that's a whole other lesson, I mean, if you go on, to Michael Graves is the restoration mastering guy on that project. If you go on his website, it's osirisstudio.com. Um, you'll see there's tapes that they were crusted in concrete. Like we had to break the tape out of it because they were rescued from the building when they were going to plow over the original Stax building.
wow,
So they were like in mud, and we got them to they were playable.
yeah,
So the thing is, the physical tape media, we can rescue that. What we can't rescue is flawed digital media at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
It's gone. It's gone. So there's, I would have been glad to have more concrete encrusted originals, but again, it's the publisher's job is to make money. The
Yeah.
fact that they actually save this stuff in any way, because they threw out the originals.
But even still, I mean, I've heard stories about tapes needed to be baked to
Sure.
be able to restore, and yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine you chiseling chunks of concrete off of
Yeah.
tape that is already falling apart to begin with, or
Yeah.
maybe the concrete preserves them because they haven't been oxidized, or any number of
Yeah.
ridiculous things that could possibly happen to tape.
We do bake tape a lot, but, that's only to get the, moisture out of it.
Yeah.
I'm so
I'm so grateful that you're able to talk about the the stuff today. I say this every time I talk to you. I'm so damn proud of what you've done and accomplished, and I am not the only Marquette alumni that feels this way about you. We're just it's just intensely proud of what you've been able to accomplish. And this box set, like I said, this is like the big crown on your head, because I feel you in this whole thing, and it's wonderful to see that you are a part of this.
Well, that's really sweet. I thank you for all of that. That's too much.
No, it's not. It's well
Too
deserved,
much.
Cheryl. It's well
Uh,
deserved. I'm sure I'm not the only one, or the first or last, who will tell you that. It really is
well, I
remarkable.
love talking to you, and if I have to go win another Grammy to talk to you again, I
Well,
guess I'll put that on my list of things to do.
well, at least I gave you a week to cool down before I contact you. Just like, well,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
am
want to.
sore. I think it's because I was wearing all those fancy clothes. Man,
No,
takes a toll.
it's from holding on to all four Grammys at once, Cheryl. That's what it's
Bench
all.
pressing them.
Hey, it's great to talk to you again. Best of luck. I'm sure we will talk again soon, one way or another.
Thank you, sir.
Take care,
Take
Cheryl.
care.
Good to see you.
Thanks.
Again, the name of Cheryl's Grammy Award-winning box set is called Written in Their Soul, the Stax Songwriter Demos. You should also check out OmnivoreRecordings.com to see what else her company has been involved with. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to Metro Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram of Chicopee. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. And thanks again for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.